That's Dave, the bass player for the Apathetics.
In 1999, 15-year-old David was misdiagnosed with adolescent depression and sent off to CEDU in the San Bernardino Mountains. Before that point, David was a successful student in public high school and involved in Chicago's punk rock community. CEDU is known as one of the oldest and most influential residential treatment facilities. Their programs were founded and operated by key members of the notorious Synanon cult. CEDU could easily be called the birthplace of the troubled teen industry, with its influence, language, and former staff still prevalent in many facilities today. In 2015, dedicated children's rights advocate Phil Elberg would describe CEDU as, quote, amateurs operating an unregulated prison camp. To learn therapeutic techniques for happiness, David's parents sent him over 2,000 miles to Southern California from their suburban Chicago home. A psychologist had introduced CEDU to David's parents, armed with a promotional brochure and video cassette. It was the psychologist's only recommendation, and David would be one of several local kids he helped enroll at CEDU.
It's a place where your child will be safe and part of another loving family for a while.
After this pitch, Howard and Cheryl Swibel, a prominent but historically controversial political family in Chicago, met with David and his parents to further endorse CEDU.
CEDU gives kids who have lost their way a chance to get their feet on the ground and rediscover some positive sense of life.
True believers in the program, the Swibels co-founded the Friends of CEDU Foundation, now renamed the Friends of Families with Children in Crisis. Their organization still operates, comprised of CEDU parents and formerly high-ranking CEDU staff, and as of 2020 offers collateralized loans to guardians so that they can afford to keep their children in residential treatment programs. Not long after his arrival in the remote mountain town of Running Springs, David experienced his first smush session, a mandatory CEDU practice of forced sexualized cuddling between child residents and adult staff. David soon realized that CEDU staff were participants in all of the program's so-called emotional growth tactics alongside the teens. In fact, it was a job requirement. Adults did not just oversee treatment, but were treating themselves.
There are 35 staff members at CEDU, most of them ex-drug users. None of them are professionals in the sense of having credentials for the job, but they're all streetwise.
We didn't have to worry so much about what was going on, and we began to be able to take advantage of the CEDU program, and we attended all the seminars.
David believes CEDU was a marketing-savvy, self-help cult mainly intended for staff and parents. The kids themselves were throwaway. CEDU's founder, Mel Wasserman, even referred to them as asses in beds.
Mel once said, "I want asses in bed." He's a businessman. He ran a furniture store. I want bucks, asses in bed.
It didn't take long for David to recognize that the vast majority of the youth held at CEDU seemed to be as healthy and average as any teenagers in public high school. David could not reconcile how or why kids were being admitted into the program. Nevertheless, CEDU would be David's home for 16 months. The things he loved most, books and music, were largely banned from the program and deemed a punishable offense. Like all residents, David was stripped of his rights and without access to phones, money, identification, and the outside world. Like all residents, he endured CEDU's brutal, ritualistic, humiliating, and ceaseless counter-therapeutic treatments that were physically and psychologically ruinous. In May of 2000, 8 months before his scheduled CEDU graduation, David's parents pulled him from the program. He returned to public high school, then went on to college and a career in songwriting, advertising jingles, and freelance journalism. Shunned by the CEDU community for leaving the program early, and confused and embarrassed by his experiences there, David decided to keep his entire 16-month confinement a secret when he returned to civilian life in suburban Chicago. While he continued to keep CEDU hidden from even his closest friends, as David grew older he wanted to understand his childhood program more. What was CEDU's true origins? Why was there so much media misrepresentation and so many puff pieces about the program? Why, for decades, did local police and state agencies like the California Department of Social Services allow CEDU to carry out such maltreatment? In 2015, curiosity drove him to begin what would become a 3-year journalistic investigation into the program. Then in June 2018, David anonymously published his findings on Medium. He called himself Medium Anonymous. Widely read among the survivor community, this long article is the most comprehensive investigative piece on CEDU to date. Among other things, David's investigation uncovered that the state of California substantiated widespread, decades-long child abuse allegations at CEDU, but still let this powerful program flout state laws and regulations and go unchecked. David then went on to produce The Lost Kids, a 6-part true crime podcast about CEDU, Synanon, and the troubled teen industry, released by NBC Universal in June of 2020. Unhappy with NBC's final version of The Lost Kids, and the podcast's lack of resources for survivors, David has decided that it's time to come forward and break his anonymity and his silence.
My name is David Safran. I am proudly in a shirt that CEDU would punish me for wearing, and I am breaking code silence.